So make yourselves comfortable, help yourself to refreshments. My wife is always experimenting with a new recipe. I got to tell you how frustrating it is. She really wants me to read it. So I'll give it a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. And then she'll think about it and she said, well, I think I want to try another one. And so I may never see that one again. It was a 10, but I guess we're in search of the 20 or the 30 out of a scale of 1 to 10. I don't know. But anyway, good variety. I did check it out. I wouldn't let you partake of that unless I was very sure it's going to meet all expectations. So do help yourself. Let's begin with a word of prayer, shall we? Father, thank you for this Lord's Day. And as we commemorate the coming of our Savior to be born here amongst men, to live and to die for us, we now arrive at a particular time in our church history, in Bible history, where we acknowledge the announcement of Christ as the coming King, and then his sufferings and trials, and eventually this very week, his death on the cross of Calvary many years ago. Thank you that it is still efficacious. His death still atones for sin. Bless our time together then. Give us both insight and a heart for God. In Jesus' name, amen. So we will try to rush quite a bit here today. Of course, our target will be to spend a little time next Lord's Day at the time and scene of the resurrection of Christ. So we're going to get as far as we can, and possibly even to crucifixion. I put together slides. It's quite a challenge to go back through and pull out and delete slides, delete slides, and delete slides. I was telling Ralph and Joan that I have a number of master programs that I put together over quite a few years. And some of them have 450 slides in one presentation. And I have several of them for Passion Week. But then trying to pull out only the ones that I choose to show us for varying reasons. It depends on our purpose at that particular time. And then assemble them. So I hope they ended up in the right order. I hope that they ended up, these are slides of Jerusalem, not Galilee. I mean, I hope. But let me just walk you through several things. We have been talking about the movement of Christ, and I shared with you, I differ with the timing of a Friday crucifixion. I don't think that that's accurate at all. The movements, however, there are a couple of things that certainly come into play when we're looking at a pictorial presentation that stirs our thoughts, our emotions, our minds as well. Certainly the geographic aspect of what was Jerusalem like, where did Jesus move and travel, and then particularly in these final days, that last Passion Week. But then also much of the background material. And we're going to have to acknowledge that there's hardly a site that does not come with different opinions. That would certainly hold true for the place of the crucifixion and the place of burial. Those are disputed. But it isn't only that, it's where Jesus was taken when he went to the house of Caiaphas, and where the chief priest and all of his cronies were really thumping on the Lord and beating him. And then also before Pilate and before Herod. There are differing ideas of where in Jerusalem was this location, and where would they choose to meet with the Lord and to try him. And then, of course, the place of crucifixion and the place of burial. I wanted to take you on just a quick tour, moving around the city a little bit. This gives you a pretty good shot looking at some distance, but essentially starting on the northeast corner and kind of moving around. We switch now to a scale model, northeast corner. There are pools over here. These pools have been excavated and dug up. You can visit them. They're actually quite interesting to explore. But going down the eastern gate, and there is the temple always facing toward the east, and the eastern gate there. Now we switch to an aerial shot, and you see from up above, you see where the Temple Mount itself was, we're looking at the eastern wall and the southern wall. You see quite a few excavations on the southern wall. The western wall will be over in this direction, where you can, if we were to look on the other side, you'd see the western also, aka Wailing Wall. I know that's called the Wailing Wall by most people. The Jewish people actually would rather call it the Western Wall, just because there is a possibility of using the term Wailing Wall to really deride the Jewish people. And so there are lots of groups of people that would choose to do that. Now this is the Kidron Valley, and this runs on the eastern side. You get a little better picture from here of the terrain. So when we talk about Jesus leaving the city, going down into the valley and up the other side, you can see that the topography here, well, pictures in a 2D range hardly do justice to that. So now we're looking on the south side. We've come down the eastern side. We've come to the corner, the pinnacle of the temple, where in all likelihood Jesus stood when the devil tempted him. Satan said, if you bow down before me, all these kingdoms I'll give you. In fact, if you don't jump off, you're not really proving the Lord your God, that you trust him, because he promised he'll give his angels charge over you, lest you dash your foot against a stone and injure yourself. And so he promised to take care of you. And in fact, if you don't jump and give him that opportunity to prove himself, and the comeback of Jesus, you remember, was a very good lesson for us. You will not put the Lord your God to the test. You will not box God into a corner and say, I'm going to do something really stupid and foolish, whether it be to jeopardize my life, I'm going to drink this poison, or I'm going to jump off this cliff. And if you really love me, you said you would take care of me, and so here goes. And God said, well, don't put me to the test. And I just want to warn you, in your case, God may say, sayonara, see you in a few seconds. So don't test the Lord your God. But that was probably the location for it there. Now looking again from the eastern side, a little different view, and the pools here, the southern pinnacle. But now I want you to see the reconstructed steps on the south, and notice those two gates, and Solomon's portico up here, or the royal stoa, where the Sanhedrin was apt to meet, right up there. And this is the highest point from the top, the pinnacle, to the bottom. And a little upper shot. Now you notice those two openings there. Those are the stairways, the tunnel that goes down at an angle and opens up into the steps on the south. So again, this is the eastern gate. That's the corner excavations there. This is the southern wall, excavations all through there. And wouldn't that be interesting? Yes, those are originally the steps coming up in. And you see there was a gate. There are double gates, and there's one triple gate on this southern wall. This is excavation there in the south. You see the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. That's on the southernmost range of the Temple Mount up above. And more of that here. There actually was a pool here at one time. There are a number of mikvahs, which are ritual baths for Gentiles that want to become Jewish, and so we would say proselytes, and they denounce their paganism. They say they believe in the God of Israel, and they're not born Jewish, but they sure want to be Jewish. And so they're welcomed into that, but there are a number of steps to go through. But baptism, new identification with the Israeli people, baptism by immersion. And that was done generally here. Again, you're looking at some of the archaeological digs now from up close. So you begin to see in the other shots that are very garbled, and who can tell what's going on. But all of this is going on contemporaneously. A lot has been done even since those pictures. Another shot of it there. Picture back, but a little closer, so you begin to see it. And those are the reconstructed steps. So those have now been put back in. Now, understand and isolate this location for being now particularly appropriate. When Jewish people were coming to enter the temple, and they would be singing the songs of Hallel, the Hallel Psalms, Psalm 113 to 118, and they would generally sing one for every step, and actually goes up into the mid-120s. You'll find those in your Bible, and they're in the superscription that is the caption for the psalm. And this is what it looks like when they reenact it. So they come and they have their hymnals, and they're singing that psalm. And then they'll go up to another step and sing that psalm, go up to the next step and sing that psalm. And you remember that these are songs of ascent, the Psalms of Ascent. Look it up in your Bible in the psalm titles, and you'll see it there. Of course, the question is, what are they singing about? They're singing about the coming of the Messiah. And a number of months ago, I brought a message. What hymn exactly do you think Jesus and the disciples sang when they gathered for the Lord's Supper that last evening, and then they went across the Kidron Valley and up to the Mount of Olives, and before they left and broke up their meeting following the Lord's Supper, they sang a hymn, and then they went out. What hymn did they sing? Well, according to Jewish tradition, because it is ritual, year after year after year, at Passover time, do you know what psalm they sing at the conclusion of Passover? Psalm 118. And so the presumption is that Jesus is following the Jewish tradition of how we do Passover. And that included singing Psalm 118, which is one of the psalms they would be singing here. And in fact, it's been labeled with a pretty catchy title by an author that did just tremendous research as to the Jewish tradition, even before Christ. How did they conduct Passover? What were the elements, ingredients? What was the agenda? What was the order of service? And it always included, toward the end, singing Psalm 118. The title of that book was Anthems of a Dying Lamb, because it's talking about Christ, who's going to give himself. And imagine at the Lord's Supper, and I wonder what kind of a voice Jesus had, but he was singing with his disciples about himself and his upcoming encounter with God at the cross. Another view. And here we'll begin to see, you can't see them quite in these, but over on that side there's the arch, which is then walled up because there's been additional Muslim building that went on here. But there is a closer up of the arch that was there. Triple Hulda gate, and this is the scale model again, and the double gates and the steps. And this now is the Hinnom Valley. And so the Hinnom Valley comes here, and the Tyropoein Valley goes up there next to the walls of the temple. So now as we look at this, you can see the royal stoa here. This is the south wall. That's the western wall. And this first little arch coming out from the temple complex itself is named Robinson's Arch, because what was discovered, and I'll show you, I think it's in the next shot, is just the remains of that tight against the temple complex, and all the rest of it has been knocked down. Of course, that took place in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. But a little bit is left here and there. But this was a street also that went through the archway. This is Robinson's Arch. The next one is Wilson's Arch. And you go all the way up along the western wall, and that western wall is where the Jewish people gather to pray. And so that's being done today. It's the only part of the temple where the Jewish people have freedom and liberty to go and worship. And it's the outer wall of the temple until the day when that's all reinstated for the Jewish people. I've circled there the beginning of the archway. This is Robinson. There is the model of the arch. But what you would see if you were there looking at the remains would only be just this little section right here. So that's what's left archaeologically. The corner of the blocks there, you can see Herodian masonry work. You'll have to admit, not bad for being done in the turn from BC to AD times, and Herod is building the temple. But all of those blocks, and they're edged as well, And it is said that you cannot fit sideways a sheet of paper between one block and the next block. I want to give you just a quick little tour around here too. These were undoubtedly, they have something to do with how they got these blocks in place. And we're talking about massive, massive blocks. The longest one is 45 feet long and 11 feet high. One piece. And how in the world did they get it here? Must have been monster equipment, I guess. Caterpillar or John Deere, or how did they do that? Well, there are quarries right below here. Amphitheater here. Fortress of Antonio is probably the place where Jesus was taken, where the soldiers mocked and scourged him. Here's the western wall. Pay attention to that gate, or that archway at the end. That's the rabbi's tunnel. And this would be the remains of Wilson's Arch. And so this used to come on across, because this was quite a deep ravine. The Tyrophoene Valley ran up through here. And there is rabbis that they have all kinds of scripture in there, but also prayer books, hymnals, and so on. Inside shot of that from within. And we are allowed actually to go in. You have to wear a hat. You have to have covering. But to be in the prayer area, you have to as well. And if you look very closely, you won't find a space on the ground, because in time of Jewish festivities, they're all here. The gate divides the women's side from the men's side. And the phylactery on the forehead and on the forearm is indication of Orthodox Jews. And the prayer notes that everyone writes and stuffs in as far as they can. And generally pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But there are pray for my grandmother, pray for my uncle, pray for... So people come here, the Jewish people, all the time to pray. This is an inscription that was found at the base of the temple area, and that corner where Jesus was, in all likelihood, and tempted, is called the place of trumpeting. And so the inscription in Hebrew here gives instruction. This is the place of the trumpeting. And some of that has been refabricated, and this is a Gentile prohibition. This also was found outside of the temple. This was a stone that was etched, and it's put there, and the inscription reads, this is Greek, by the way, "No foreigner may enter within the railing and enclosure surrounding the temple. Whoever is captured will have himself to blame for his subsequent death." So in other words, stay out. That would be simpler, but they want to make sure you get the message completely. And here's a picture of the arches. There's the royal stoa. We're looking along the western wall toward the south. This is wood framing, because the picture actually is taken in the model that exists below the temple. And so when we go down in the rabbi's tunnel, we have a lecture down below, and they have reconstructed. This is not the same as what you've been looking at, the marble little blocks that are just about 2.5 feet high, and we refer to that a lot. Very well done. So is this one, but this is the one underneath the temple. And so a guide will take his group down here when you have permission. You have to have a lot of clearance to go there, but you know, the guides and tour guides all handle that. You go down underground in the tunnel, and you look at what Jerusalem looked like in the time of Christ. This is the walkway in the underground tunnel. So here you are underneath the temple, and here, and here. This is assumed to be Solomon's stables. There was some hint that Solomon had his stables here or nearby, and so when they found this particular structure underground below the temple, it was just tagged, oh, this must be Solomon's stables. In all likelihood, not the case, is part of the structure. But here's some of the stone work that's here as well. The particular, there's a little bit of a recess in the upper course of the stonework that's done there. Everything fits exactly, and it's outlined, it's sculpted so as to draw attention. Herod, of course, was quite a construction engineer. He's brilliant. but he loved to make sure everybody knew that he's the one that did all of this. Another picture of it there. So you see the detail work, and all that done with masons. Now let's go back in time a little bit and predate Herod in the AD to BC to AD times. Let's go back to 960 when Solomon built, and he built his temple. But it says that the sound of the hammer and chisel below ground, because that's where the stones were taken for this. You couldn't even hear that. It was done so carefully and so quietly as not to disturb all the worship and the sacrifices going on up above ground. But the quarries are still down there. So here's the block. This is the largest stone you're looking at, 11 feet high, 45 feet long, 570 tons. You'd probably need a partner if you're going to move that stone. You probably couldn't do it alone. How in the world? There are a number of things around the world that are real mysteries as to how they accomplish this, but this is certainly one of them. And the indentations and the block areas are no question, it has something to do with using long poles or metal bars and a lot of slaves, a lot of ropes, a lot of pulleys, a lot of horses, a lot of oxen, and on rollers. But other than that, we really don't know how they did that. This is the main entrance to Solomon's quarry, near the north, on the north wall near the Damascus Gate, which is directly north. This is underground. And you begin to see some block-like shapes. That's where they chiseled out. Now, how do they do that? Well, first they chisel, and then they use, it must take a lot of ingenuity, but they make a little bit of a crevice, a line, and drill a little hole, and then they put wood down in each of those holes, and they drip water on the wood. What will that do? It'll expand the wood and split the rock right on that line. Wow. That's, you can see where they extracted blocks from this spot. And here's a place where they left a pillar. They've taken some blocks up, but they left this for the support because the Temple Mount is up above. So with this kind of bracing and support, the roof will be just fine. There was rumor that there is underground trail through the caves from Jerusalem under the Temple Mount that opens up down in Jericho. That's about 7 miles away. I don't know if if you're a little claustrophobic, you might not want to go on that hike. But they say there are people who have done that. I'm quite sure it's off limits anymore. They wouldn't allow that to go on. And as well, the exit coming out of Solomon's quarries would be here. Now, I come back here to our discussion last time. We kind of ended up right here. And this is dealing with the timing now, the days and the timing of that last week. We have certain things that are found in the Bible. The real challenge of putting all this together is taking from all the gospel accounts and then potentially, additionally, some other resources. It could be Josephus, it could be Philo, it could be, we don't grant them the same credibility that we have in the Bible, but even within the Bible, we have a number of things that often seem to collide. And that leads people to great confusion. It could cause somebody to say, well, you really can't trust the Bible because one gospel says this, another gospel says something else. The answer to that undoubtedly comes when you understand the full context, exactly how things go, you will be able to solve the issue. But this is almost a lifelong project to put Passion Week in order. Now let me give you just another sample of why this can be challenging one gospel to another. You have both Jewish time and you have Roman time. And Jewish time generally, when it's technical and especially when you have enumeration. Example, creation. The evening and the morning were day number 1. And that's what it says in Hebrew very specifically. Yom Echad, day number 1. And so you just numbered that day. And it included the evening and the daytime. So it's a 24-hour period from roughly twilight to twilight when the sun is going down the next day. That's one day. So the Jewish day generally runs, but now if you're going to talk about crucifixion day, if you were to land on Wednesday and say, well, Christ died on Wednesday, well, what was that? Well, whatever day it was in Jewish timing, it began 6 p.m. or twilight when the rabbi would blow the trumpet. Now we begin the next day. That's actually Tuesday evening. But on our Roman calendars, our Gregorian calendars, no, it's midnight to midnight. So everything is offset. And wouldn't you know it, John, in dealing more with a Gentile approach, and he was the pastor of the church in Ephesus, and his gospel was for Asia Minor and Turkey primarily. See, it's interesting that all four gospels have specific targets. Mark, more Roman. John, more Asia Minor and Turkey. Matthew was highly Jewish. And Luke, Gentiles, spanning really all. But how do you know the timing? So in John's gospel, compared with the other gospel accounts, and it was the third watch of the night. Well, when is that? Well, it depends. Are you talking Roman time or are you talking Jewish time? And so they all are offset and shift, and it makes it seem that, well, who really knows what time it was? 3 a.m. or 6 a.m. or midnight? What do you mean, third watch? When is that? Well, it all depends. It depends on whose clock you're using. So you have to do that with all four Gospels and then piece them all together. Now, the Passover was near, and many went up to Jerusalem out of the country before Passover to purify themselves. And now Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany. So the Lord is arriving there, and then his triumphal entry is here. Some think he actually was arriving on Monday. Some say no, Sunday. We would probably lean toward the Sunday. Or was it even Saturday? There are some who say no, it had to be Saturday. But that's a bit of a conflict because riding a beast of burden would be considered illegal on Sabbath. So if this is on Saturday, Sabbath, that would be a problem. So some would say, well, no, you know, this is a special occasion or something. Well, not according to the Jewish people. You wouldn't do that. But you have to weigh all of the evidence. So the day of the triumphal entry was Nisan 10. And remember, according to that, you take that back in the Old Testament, on the 10th of Nisan, you will select the Passover lamb. And so very likely, this day, whichever day it is the announcement that Jesus is the Passover lamb. How about that? Because we're actually fitting together the festivals and feast days and the very timing and the significance of every step of what's happening there. On Tuesday, or was it Monday, on the way from Bethany to Jerusalem, you remember after the triumphal entry and turning over the tables, whatever happens in whatever order, but all the Gospels seem to pretty much have them in their proper order. But at the end of the day, Jesus left and they went back to Bethany, and in the following morning they came back to the temple. So I'm going to give you just a quick rundown of what I think happened, and the presentation of this by quite a few is that Jesus is going back to Jerusalem on Wednesday, and then he'll leave and come back on Thursday. I think, no, actually, this is on Tuesday, and this is the incident of the fig tree, which Jesus had cursed the evening before, and now, look, wow, what happened? At the temple of Jerusalem, Jesus had a day of controversy with religious leaders, and there are a number of them. So follow it in Matthew's gospel. It's one encounter after another where he is addressed by individuals trying to trap him and trick him into blasphemy, or like FBI questioning, oh, you lied, you said over here it was, and now you're saying, so they're trying to trick him. But I think that took place through the day, especially the morning hours into early afternoon. But then in the afternoon, you read in the gospel accounts, and they went to the Mount of Olives. And some are going to say, well, that certainly he couldn't have all those encounters with the Jewish leaders in one day. And the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24:25, you couldn't have all that in one. Yes, you can, actually. And if you read the text itself, at the end of those incidents, it says, and evening was coming, and when it was evening, they departed, and they went to Bethany. So I say just let the Bible speak for itself. So 2 additional things occurred on that day. Jesus predicted that he would be crucified in 2 days at the time of the Passover, and Judas planned the betrayal of Christ with the religious leaders. I think at the end of this, probably afternoon, possibly mid to late afternoon, Jesus had his disciples prepare the Passover lamb. This is after the Olivet Discourse. But it's still Tuesday. And so that evening, they celebrated the Passover meal in the upper room. Leaving the upper room, John in particular has quite a bit. Jesus talked about prayer, probably John 14, 15, 16 are there. John 17, the high priestly prayer. But all of this is going on in that upper room experience. It was an extended time together. Jesus talked about it. And then they went across to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus suffered in agony. And then Judas showed up, betrayed Christ. And the rest of that night, he was tried first by Annas, later by Caiaphas, and all the religious leaders. So we're in the middle of the night Tuesday. Early morning Wednesday, now Jesus is taken, and he is tried by the Sanhedrin, by Pilate, by Herod Antipas, and by Pilate again, and then led to the cross and crucified at about 9 o'clock in the morning. So all this is happening between 5 or 6 a.m. and now 9 o'clock. And there he's crucified and died at 3 p.m., buried that day. But they needed to take him off the cross because at 3 p.m. he's already dead, but in just a very short time, it's going to be announced, okay, the Passover has arrived. Yeah, but what Passover? So if you're a Good Friday kind of a person, you say, well, it had to be Saturday, Sabbath. But that's why we talked about Matthew chapter 28, after the Sabbaths. Another interesting seeming conflict is the arrival of the women to embalm Christ. And it says after the Sabbath, and the other gospel account says before the Sabbath, and you say they're all mixed up. It doesn't really matter. But actually it's after the one Sabbath had ended, the high holy Sabbath, and before the Saturday Sabbath had arrived. So if you understand that, wow, now it all begins to make sense. Now I put this together just to show a little bit, but obviously it's not proportional. The birth of Jesus, beginning of public ministry, the triumphal entry, the death of Christ during Passion Week and resurrection, assuming that that is 3 days and 3 nights. So we want to account for whatever we can. We'll call them fixed dates, but are they necessarily fixed? Well, no, there's so much wiggle room and discussion about, because we're actually connecting Bible events with also civil events. Herod and Herod's death and different leaders who are named in the Bible. And not only that, but sometimes we have even detail about other things. You realize that Jesus was not born when BC became AD. That's a mistake, and nearly all recognize that the dating system was shifted in the earliest time period when AD times are just getting launched, and somebody didn't quite know when to push the button and start the stopwatch. So actually Jesus was born, by all accounts, 5, maybe 4 BC. He began his ministry when he was about 30 years old. Luke says that. That's Luke. So whatever that starting point is for his life, 4, 5 BC, somewhere in that range, you could move a little this side or that if you could prove it, historically. But he was about 30 years old. It doesn't mean he was 30. He could have been 31. He could have been 29. He could have been 32, but somewhere in there. And then Luke ties the beginning of John the Baptist's ministry to the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. Luke 3:1 says that, the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. So That we understand historically. Now the dates are tightening. We have a lot of other things that enter into the reign of Tiberius, and so we kind of get it. So there's a little range between August 19, AD 28, possibly a year and a quarter later, which would be December 31, AD 29. But within that range, you can't go too far now. And John began his ministry just before Jesus did, because John was baptizing and Jesus came to him to be baptized. Remember? So how long before? Well, we don't know, but not very long before Jesus was in public ministry and announced as such at the baptism, "This is my beloved Son," the voice called from heaven. Hear him. That was when he was baptized by John. So when did John enter ministry? When did Jesus enter ministry? Not very long after that. So you see, we've got a little space to work with, not a great deal. And all of this, of course, are going to have to all convene and converge there as well. So Jesus began his ministry shortly after John the Baptist, possibly late AD 28, and at the latest sometime around 30 AD. Now, this again, I think is a little too tight for the reality of some of the facts. But you can see that we at least can consolidate and begin to appraise certain things, and certain things would be way too far away. So just consider this. If Jesus was born in 4 BC, and if he began his ministry shortly after John the Baptist, at the very earliest, it would have begun in late AD 28. Then he would be 31 years old when he began his ministry, and 3 years of public ministry would have come to a close in 31 AD. 31 AD, Passover was on Wednesday. Whoa. Does that lock this in? Does this say absolute proof, proof positive, no way around it? I don't think so. But I will tell you, it's really hard to disturb that number right there. And if the death of Christ on the cross of Calvary coincides with, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world," if he died on Passover, and if the timing to get 3 days and 3 nights before a resurrection out of the tomb, I think Christ had to die on Wednesday. And if he died on Wednesday, this is certainly a possibility. And it does seem to fit within a reasonable space, since we don't know exactly. He was about 30 when he began his earthly ministry, and his public ministry was about 3 years. We don't think we can come too much closer than that, but I'm urging for rethink the Friday crucifixion, because whatever you do with that, if Matthew 12 is Bible truth, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights, so Christ will be 3 days and 3 nights. And if 3 days and 3 nights means 3 days and 3 nights, it's really hard to get anything other than a Wednesday crucifixion. Now, some have really worked hard. Well, it could have been Thursday. There's a way it might have been Thursday. I won't go into all the reasoning on that. Numerous articles, entire books have been written trying to solve this mystery. So, as we look here, we're looking from the temple area. It's an aerial shot, of course, but you're looking across the Kidron Valley, and again, remember how deep it is. Two-dimensional pictures just don't do it. But you're looking at the Church of All Nations there. You're looking at the Garden of Gethsemane up in here. And further south is the place of ascension, where it is reputed that Jesus left in Acts chapter 1. While they were gazing, he rose back to the heavens. But the Garden of Gethsemane is located in that area. Now, Titus, when he came through in 70 AD, cut down basically all trees. That's the way you ruin a country, is you ruin their crops, because it can take about 7 years for an olive tree to grow back to bearing fruit. So they'll be without their main productivity. They won't have olive oil for food or for oil lamps, and so just cut down the trees. So that's what you do to ruin a nation. But interestingly, it is reputed that some of the olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane have grown up from the roots. And they've done this just through studying some of those trees. And they say these, down below surface, it appears those are original roots. And trees do have a way of doing that from time to time. But arrested in Gethsemane, brought to the house of Caiaphas. Now you notice we're in the lower part of the city, on the western side, and then from there up to the fortress, up to the temple, where he was brought to the council. It may have been there, it may have been in the portico down here to the south, but brought to the council, and they were interrogating him. And then all the way back over to be tried by Pilate. Herod's palace is probably the place. But in Caiaphas' house, and some people dispute that or its location. This is the upper room. And that was not very far away from Caiaphas' house, but that's where Jesus began that Tuesday evening, then went to the Garden of Gethsemane. Just picture, and notice the reclining position, a table fairly low. They found this outside the temple area. These are coins for the temple tax, called a perutot in Hebrew. It was in a Herodian era street near the temple, and Jewish travelers brought this, and they had to exchange it for the shekels, the half shekel for the temple tax. And this was done in the temple area, such that Jesus turned the tables over and flagged that whip and drove the people out. You've made this a house of thieves, because they were charging a humongous inflation rate, a tax rate, for the privilege of exchanging money. I remember the times I used to have to travel overseas, in India in particular, always bothered by when you exchange your American currency and you want to go with Indian rupees. And so you turn in American money and you say, okay, so at the exchange rate I should get, why don't I have that much? Well, no, we have to charge something. We're a bank. Yeah, they had to charge something because that's what they do. Now, I'm giving from the Talmud, which is Jewish commentary, but just read this about the house of Annas. So you've got Caiaphas and Annas. One is the figurehead chief priest, and the other is his son-in-law, who is the chief priest, the high priest. It was a paid position. And this is what, and Josephus will tell you this, the Jewish people will tell you this, Jesus told you this when he was angry with the hypocrisy of the Jewish leaders, because they were very, very money hungry. Woe is me because of the house of Bothus. Woe is me because of their staves. Woe is me because staves for beating, rods for beating. Woe is me because of the house of Hanin, which is Annas. It's written about him. Woe is me because of their whisperings. Woe is me because of the house of Cathros. Woe is me because of their pens. Woe is me because of the house of Ishmael, the son of Fabi. Woe is me because of their fists. For they are high priests, and their sons are temple treasurers, and their sons-in-law are trustees, and their servants beat the people with staves. Did the high priestly family have a reputation? Yeah. Was it a good reputation? Not hardly. And the Jewish people hated them. They were so unfair, so unjust, and they certainly lived a very wealthy lifestyle. Reproduced model of what's been found, the palatial mansion. And I don't know if I included a slide to show you right where that is. It's up closer to the temple area. This is like a 5,000 square foot house. And these people could afford that, no problem. And they were the priestly group of religious leaders. Now, you know, we don't have any problem with people that earn, that work hard, have saved, have been successful. Abraham was very wealthy, a number of individuals in the Bible. But we do have a problem with dishonesty, cheating, extortion, robbing, high interest rates to people that can hardly afford it, and make tons of money off their difficult situation in life. Nah, that's what we're talking about. So, all of this. St. Peter in Gallican too. St. Peter in the cock's crow. The cock crows. Do you see that building with the dome top just directly at the left side? That's the house of Caiaphas. That's disputed. I readily admit you can go almost any place in Jerusalem or in all of Galilee, and somebody will say, well, I don't think that was the real place. And there are pros and cons. So we're talking about lengthy studies. Archaeologists debate this, and they produce papers on this. They write books on this. This site or this site, which one? But we expect this is the one. Let me take you also inside. You see the dome up on top? This wasn't original. This wasn't in Jesus' time. It's a commemoration. You've got a rooster up on top. Oh, that's the proof. I'm not saying that was in Jesus' time. But this is from the front. This is way downhill. Quite a slope, you know, on the south side of Jerusalem. And this is the walkway that goes up to the top. Or actually, I'm sorry, we're at the top and we're looking down. And looking up these stairs. These are original. And there's a little retaining wall and courtyard area. In all likelihood, that's where Peter was, warming himself by the fire and being interrogated up there, quizzed. Aren't you one of those from Galilee, followers of this Jesus of Nazareth? No, not me. I never met the man. 3 times Peter denied. And this is quite a door that commemorates all that. The interior, of course, has been made into a basilica, a cathedral. And downstairs, the alleged prison is this area right here. This is, nobody carved this out in later times. This is from Jesus' time. Also, the bowls cut out, crystallized salt has been found in the bottom of those for the salt brine that was applied to the wounds of prisoners. And then also, I don't know if you can see or not, there are some holes cut in the corners that would be indicative of thongs being held to stretch out a prisoner and to be flagellated and beaten. And then a little chapel as well. It used to be very difficult to go down in. It was like a manhole cover, but they now have a set of stairs. And it does have an outside entrance now, or it actually did in Jesus' time too. Now after that, through the night, when Jesus was held here, when it was day, the Council of Elders. So now, if my timeline is right, then I would say we're Wednesday morning, daybreak, maybe. When it was day, the Council of Elders and the people assembled, both the chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chamber, saying, if you are Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. Need he say more? Tell us, who are you? Are you God? And they all said, you are the Son of God then. He said to them, yes, ego eimi, I am. That's like the 7 I ams in John's Gospel. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world, and so on. So his answer, ego eimi, I, myself, I'm he. Again, looking at the portico, the Sanhedrin may have met there. Some think that it was in the temple itself, and this pool, again, reconstructed. And the location of Caiaphas' house would be over in this area here. This is quite a wealthy district and territory all through here. And Pilate and Herod had quarters set up. This is the fortress of Antonia. The pavement here is etched. It's been, sealer's been put on it. This is actually a trough where water would run this way. It's like a gutter. Herod had designed this. Some dispute whether this is all the way back to Herodian times. Others say, no, we're quite sure. But also what's interesting here is that you find some etching here, and that has become known, this circle up here. And you can barely make that out now. But it resembles what was known as the King's Game, where they would roll dice and they would beat and inflict a prisoner. And you know the story in the gospel account. They put a purple robe on him and they put a crown of thorns on him. Now we begin the Stations of the Cross, and this is celebrated each year. I'm just going to go through very, very quickly here. And we would take exception to some of these that seem to be very contrived. But all of these are considered to be points, even identifying for a fact this is it, when we have a harder time identifying for a fact some of the other more important, significant sites, and not everyone agrees. And the Lord was stripped here and laid across a wooden cross and nailed, and then that was lifted up and dropped into the hole. The crucifixion is recognized in the Catholic Church and many, many denominations, by far majority idea, that it was in a certain place. You wouldn't be able to recognize this because of all the tapestry and the large building. It kind of flies in the face of what we imagine, so in a sense we rather object to this kind of thinking, this is the location, for that reason alone. That's not a good reason just to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are reasons why they think this is the location. Ecce homo, Latin, what does that mean? Behold a man. Behold the man. You remember that. This is that etched game. A little different shot with different lighting, and it makes a little bit more of it stand out. Fortress of Antonia with the four pillars there. And now we're looking from the west side, and the Fortress of Antonio is right over here. It's actually, it comes out over here, so we've only got a part of the picture there, but you get the general idea. And this is the Catholic or mainline denominational view of where Golgotha is. But you wouldn't know that now because of all this is populated with homes. And there is a building there called the place of Jesus' death by Catholic tradition. And I'll be taking you elsewhere at a different point. We'll kind of end with that quickly. Actually, no, that's okay. So this is the Garden Tomb. This is to the exact north of the city, whereas the other is a bit east or westward. But there is a trough right there and a large stone here that would roll over and close that in. And we hold services here. It's a wonderful place. You can hear the street sounds behind you, not very far away. It's busy. It's Jerusalem. But I will say it's quite a little haven here, and it's well tended. The individuals that care for this are just, I think they're gems of people. They really care about preserving this. And they're convinced this is the location. I don't know that all the signs point toward, yep, this has got to be the place, but it could be. Certain things have to be the case. They took his body off the cross, and there was a garden nearby. Remember that? There was a garden nearby in which no body had been placed. And so this is a tomb. It was apparently unused until, if perhaps by Christ, only placed for one burial there. A lot of places have niches where a whole family could be placed in a sepulcher. So I'm going to pause right there. We're going to come back and we'll be looking at especially resurrection slides and more on that theme. I certainly want to invite you back. We're going to have to cut a little bit short next week because we want to get started upstairs very, very quickly. We've got a great music presentation next week, so please invite your friends. I kind of think it may be the best one ever. So great opportunity for people to hear that. And then I'll be bringing a short devotional. Given the length of the cantata, it'll be a short devotional on the triumph of the tomb. I want to deal with that subject of triumph and tomb. How can those go together? But in Scripture they do. So I want to show you where that is. Okay, we have a couple minutes. I'll let you ask any questions if you'd like to do that. Okay, again, there's a whole lot more. I started with 449 slides. I got it down to this size, and I left out all kinds of stuff. I don't know that I've ever shown here at Parsippany the tunnel work under, and the caves and where the blocks of stone were taken. And I'm really thankful to have quite a few different models of the city of Jerusalem that really are quite detailed and help us know a lot more of where things were, where they happened. But anyway, I hope that was a blessing to you one final time. Okay.
Would
Yeah.
you have those 400 and something slides with footnotes as well? That if you could share so we can read what's...
Yeah. I have footnotes for virtually every slide. I don't do the work of importing all of them for every slide I show. I have most of these from professionally taken, and they come complete. Some of them have an entire page or 2 pages of notes. Some of them have, a short paragraph, and I can copy paste and put them in the notes. I do that sometimes, but I actually primarily choose not to. It's both complicated, time-consuming, slide by slide by slide. So I try to come prepared with having rehearsed and gone over the notes, and I know them, or I've had access to them to refresh my memory. We do have a couple minutes, so.
So all this picture that you show, you have been there